the way that you've had to teach your children differently than if they were privileged like me? Hi, everyone. It's Shaelene McInnis here with Books in Line, as you know, the accounting company, and with the Ontario Wellness Network. It's a magazine, digital and physical copy, if you'd like, all focusing on wellness. This is Ashley. She and I met through a mutual friend who we both like very much. And our friend told Ashley she should come and speak on this podcast because she has a number of things to talk about when it comes to wellness. So I'm going to ask Ashley to go ahead and introduce herself.
Sure. Hello. My name is Ashley Treavajo. I am a licensed mortgage agent with the Sherwood Mortgage Group. I am a mom of 2 kids. My son will be 6. My daughter will be 4 in January. And I'm also a published author. I've co-authored in Honest as a Mother, Volume 1 and Volume 2, which is coming out in the next few weeks.
You know, we'd like to make sure that we're going to share the links for those books as well. So once you get the second one, let us know. But give us the first one as well. And all of Ashley's contact information will be included on this podcast so that you can contact her if you want to speak with her about the number of subjects that she's going to speak with today. So why don't you tell us first of all a bit about the volume 1 of the book?
Sure. So Honest as a Mother is actually another podcast entity, and she was looking for authors to co-author in this book, and I thought, well, that'd be kind of fun and cool to do, check off my bucket list. So it came out about a year ago, just almost a year ago now, and in volume 1, I originally had this idea that I was going to write about my postpartum depression and anxiety and my experiences with that. Something kind of clicked in my brain, and my husband actually had a interesting encounter at school one day, and it kind of lit a fire under me to actually write about my experiences as a white female raising biracial children. My husband's Trinidadian, so if you will, my kids are mixed. So the racisms, the stigmas, the things I experienced being pregnant, and just even having them in the community, but also the worries and the fears that as they grow up, what I face versus, say, a full Caucasian family.
Yes, yeah. I can only imagine. Oh my goodness! How old are your children, if you don't mind my asking?
Yeah, my son will be 6 in October, and my daughter will be 4 in January. So they're still young and innocent now, but yeah.
I have a wonderful girlfriend, originally from Jamaica, and she was telling me all these different stories about how she has, which, because of course I know I'm privileged, like I know I'm white, and being white is I do know that. I have full understanding of that. But she was telling me things that she would have to talk about with her kids that I would never even thought about bringing up with my kids. Can you give us an example of the way that you've had to teach your children differently than if they were privileged like me?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, my kids are so young still. But I guess even something as simple as like talking about our skin tones is like a regular conversation, right? And so like, it's, say there's a child in my son's school or in his class, I should say, and an example last year was, I don't recognize this child's name. I go, what does that child look like, right? And his response was, he's chocolatey like daddy, right? So, and then I saw said child on the playground, and he was in fact chocolatey like daddy, I guess you could say.
Cute. Yeah.
So
yeah, I guess you would have.
Yeah. Those kind of conversations with our kids. I think right now, too, sometimes while they're still young, sometimes it's been a conversation just with like either family or friends, or even making comments about, say, their hair. Their hair texture is different than mine, different than my husband's, right? Yeah. Just even having a conversation about that, right?
Yeah. I guess those would be things you're talking about. So I'd like to see that in that book. I'm going to have to get that book because I'd like to read that chapter. Absolutely. Can you tell me about your second book now that's about to come out, the collaboration?
Yeah, so the second one is Honest as a Mother, Volume 2. And again, the woman that was doing is the lead author. She was looking for co-authors again. So I was like, oh, I'll jump in again because I think apparently I just have a lot to talk about. And so this time I wrote about my experience going from having major goals and like professionally to then now having two children, two high risk pregnancies, and totally changing my trajectory, and during the pandemic becoming a entrepreneur, but just the whole concept that as moms, there's a lot of us, we lose ourselves with especially those early days, months, early years. There's a lot happening. It's can be chaotic but amazing all at the same time. But just kind of losing yourself, but then like finding yourself again later. And like basically, even if you were climbing a corporate ladder before, maybe you have a degree, and now because priorities have changed, that's okay, and not to be hard on yourself that your pathway may not be linear, right?
No, you're exactly right. I know so many women, and I'm included in this, where upon pregnancy, we make a decision that no, we're going to change the way we live because for me, the corporate world did not fit in what I needed value-wise either. But also, no. So I started my own business too. And I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad I did because it's given me time to be with my children. It's me a lot more time at home. So I'd like to talk about specifically with what you're talking about COVID. So how was your experience during COVID? Because I know that so many women really struggled during COVID, financially, mentally, spiritually, every possible way. Actually, men did too. Don't go everyone's effort. I just mean like as in a mom. This is what I mean.
And I wish I had like the exact source, but I'm almost certain I've seen like statistics out there that during COVID, the huge as the word of the last few years is how much women have had to pivot their lives.
Yes,
we have pivoted like there's no pivoting. Like and
that's right.
And it means like there's women, and again, like you said, there's some fantastic men out there that are equally involved in family life, and they've also had to make sacrifices. But like in society, women that are and moms, we do a lot of the child rearing, we do the homemaking, and during COVID, you're doing that, and some amazing women out there are also like trying to keep their corporate career alive, right? And their 6-year-old, 7-year-olds next to them trying to do online school, and then you have babies and everything, right? So for us, it was very similar. I went on a maternity leave actually it would have been November 2019. I have a January 2020 baby.
Oh boy!
And boy, did I not know what was going to hit us. My daughter was born January 21st. I think like literally one of the last quote unquote normal pregnant or deliveries before lockdowns and precautions started happening. And then, I'm married to a teacher. So I almost tell you to the date, it was like that Thursday before March break. And I remember calling him saying, oh, he used to work with the Toronto board. I said, oh my God, Toronto's going to take 2 weeks off too. And he's like, no way. Cause we always joke that has to be like an Armageddon, Snowmageddon, whatever, for Toronto to close. Right. And anyways, the indefinite March break, as I call it, happened. And I had about almost a 2-month-old, 2.5-year-old, and my husband teaching grade 1 at home. All
online. Oh my goodness.
Online, all within like a week or two.
Oh, I know. That's I just wow, with a 2-week-old. Oh no.
It was interesting to say but it was interesting to say the least. We somehow managed to make it happen and make it work because we're on this side of things. But a lot of it was like, if he had to teach somewhere, say even in our living room, I'm like shuffling the kids down to the basement or moving and trying to do nap times while they're not interrupting his lesson. And, is a lot of those changes. And for me, I came from 12 years frontline healthcare. I was a physiotherapy assistant and occupational therapy assistant. So during the pandemic, I was watching all of this unravel. Most recently, I worked in a long-term care home in Toronto or in Scarborough.
Yeah.
And the home in particular that I worked at, I guess it would have been those early months, April, May 2020.
Yeah.
They unfortunately got totally wiped out by a COVID outbreak. I think there was 52 residents that had passed. And it was like a very surreal situation for me. Just watch all of it unravel on the news, but then also get updates personally from colleagues about residents that I would have known for the last 5 years working there, right? And this is what kind of pushed me to make a big jump, because I, again, going back to priorities change. And I could not imagine going back I was due to go back November 2020. So things were still very scary and unknown that year. Yeah. And I couldn't imagine going back to the front lines and possibly either me getting sick or bringing it home to my young kids or husband. So I made this huge, crazy leap into the unknown land of entrepreneurship, as we would say. And I did my mortgage agent course between toddler napping, nursing sessions, all that, and did my exam and got licensed in September 2020.
Good for you. Good for you. And now you're self-employed. Good for you.
Now I'm self-employed 3 years later. So that's, I think, a big milestone in the self-employed world. So
I think that's excellent. I'd like to go back to January of 2020 and perhaps to the first child as well. You said that you struggled with some mental health issues, maybe? Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, the saying, like, I wish I knew then what I know now. Yeah. I definitely was struggling after my first. My first was born in October 2017.
Right.
I definitely, now that I look back, I definitely was struggling. And I think as a first-time mom, it was like, you don't speak up about those things. You don't want to say you're struggling.
Yeah.
There's always that fear, oh my God, they're going to take my kid away or something. Yeah. That's what you're thinking, right? Right. But I remember just not being myself, mood-wise, but also being just always on edge about life, right? Literally everything. And yeah, I guess too, it's other generations, it's very much the postpartum health has never been something talked about until, I want to say, really recently.
I agree.
So if you want to talk about to your parents or aunts or uncles, for, it's what are you talking about? That it's oh, everyone's been there, right? And it's a way to brush it off, right?
That's so
it's such an old school, exactly.
It's so dismissive too. It's just making you irrelevant. So please continue.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, it's just oh yeah, well, every mom's been there. It's oh, and then it makes you think, okay, well maybe this is normal, but really you're struggling, right? So then as my son got older, I realized, and I kind of, the cloud of everything started lifting. Yeah. I was whoa, who was that person? And that's where I really started looking into what postpartum depression and anxiety was. And I was nope, that was definitely there. Just an undiagnosed one, because I just knew it just wasn't me.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah, of course.
Yeah. You kind of, it was one of those outer body, it's whoa, who is that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So then fast forward to my daughter being born in January 2020, I thought mentally, I was okay, you know what? My husband's going to take some time off. My mom's going to be able to help. I was trying to kind of put the things in place so I didn't feel so much struggle.
Yeah, of course.
The overwhelm. So my daughter was born, and then unfortunately my grandmother had fallen and broke her hip. So my mom had to go into caregiver mode and could not help.
Right.
Right around that time as well, the teachers were striking. So my husband, who I thought had home, had to go back because, in politics stuff, they have to go on the picket lines and do what they got to do.
That's right.
So I was just slowly watching what I thought. I was I thought I was prepared, and then things were happening out of my control. Yeah. And then, like I said, fast forward to March, then the huge thing that no one could ever prepare for happened.
No.
And I think about, I want to say June of that year, I'm oh my God, I'm struggling. And I knew it again. I kind of knew right away. I was this is not good. I'm, I guess, 6-ish months postpartum.
Right.
My support system's now gone for various reasons. We're not even allowed to there was a period of time where people were allowed to even, or were afraid to even go outside of their house, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I sought out help this time.
Good.
Because I was like, this is not good. I'm not,
Yeah.
I've just come to the conclusion that me, like, again, going back to women holding the house together, I need to be good and I need to be healthy to make this whole thing run.
Yes.
So I sought out help. Again, during that time, it was virtual. So it was like this phone call, or may have even been like a video call.
Zoom.
I can't remember now. Talked to a doctor online, and she was like, nope, it sounds exactly like you have postpartum anxiety for sure, and maybe some depression happening. She offered if I wanted to go on medication, and I took her up on it. I explained to her that I was nursing, so she put me on like the lowest, safest dose of Zoloft, and I did that for about 8 or 9 months. I want to say, and then I just all of a sudden I kind of just started feeling more myself, and I kind of self-weaned myself off of it. But I knew I just needed that little, Band-Aid for that time, just to get us through that rough period, and also still dealing with the pandemic and everything else. So,
I find women often, including myself, there's such a guilt about everything. So, and so I try to remember this, and I try to share this with any of my clients. For example, when you give birth, your body has been through a trauma. Your hormones are everywhere. Your whole entire life has changed in a moment, right? So to be more forgiving to ourselves, right? And also absolutely take medication. If you're offered it and it's a safe medication and you're struggling, 100% take the medication. People get embarrassed about that kind of thing, but mental health, again, COVID was huge for bringing out the issues of mental health for everyone, seniors, teenagers, moms, everyone. Like the mental health part of it certainly came to the forefront with COVID. So I'm glad that you're here to share with what you were going through physically too. So I really appreciate that. It must have been very lonely. I know some women who've had children in 2020 and they found it extremely difficult because they couldn't get the support because you couldn't have the physical people around you, and they had to be safe and protect themselves and protect the children. So that's
having a baby during 2020 and one before, my maternity leaves were literally night and day. I could, with my son, I would meet a group of moms and we'd go walk around the Toronto Zoo together. We would go to mom groups. We'd go to the library early on, whatever, right? And then when my daughter was born,
there's nothing.
Literally sit in our backyard again. It was like, okay, let's do it again. Let's do it again, right? Yeah. And even I remember that March, though, when she was a very small baby, and because of my toddler, I leading up to March break, I even said to my husband, I was like, you know what? I think I'm starting to feel better, because I had C-section for both my kids. Yes. So I was like, I think I'm finally feeling well enough. I think I'm going to start going to this mom and baby group. And he's like, I think that's great. Right. I'm like, yeah, I think I'll start going right after March break. I had it in my mind. And then I'm like, oh, okay. And then, at those first few weeks when everything happened, and you thought, okay, it's just temporary, and then April rolled that round and you're like, okay, maybe one more week of this. Then end of the school year rolled and we're like, oh, wow, you just taught online for the first time for 3.5 months. And then he got bumped to, he meaning my husband, got bumped to virtual school for that following year. So that would have been the 2020,
September 2020. Yeah.
He got bumped to virtual he didn't want to do it, but again, got bumped because of seniority. And it was just, okay, here we go again, right?
It was, I've seen the same thing with a lot of my clients. They went through with COVID. We have so many clients, the financial struggles financially was causing huge mental health struggles. Not sure where their money was, asking me, should I take this CERB money and pay rent, or because then I won't have enough food for my family, single moms, single dads. Suddenly everyone's working from home. Here, I'm 5 minutes from the highway 401. I'm in the Kawarthas area, just right off the highway. Our internet service here is so poor that my kids would be trying to do schoolwork and I wouldn't be able to do my work. And this was during tax season. So I'm like, oh, so, we'd have to take turns because there's no high speed internet here. And we only had one option and it's so slow. And then, we'd have to pay more if, because they'd turn it down lower and slower. So and forcing you to pay more. I was so frustrated by that because it was really hard for all of us. And the one thing that was fortunate for me was my husband retired and started his own business in January of 2020. So he was able to do a lot of that because I do not know how I would have been able to run my business, make sure my employees are being taken care of and working from home safely, and also schooling the children. So yeah, I think people really struggled on a lot of different levels. I think some of us were fortunate. I don't know, timing, I don't know. But no, COVID was hard on a lot of people. But I'm glad that you're speaking to me now because we're addressing racism. We're addressing postpartum depression. We're addressing anxiety and mental health and how much we actually really need support systems. I think that's exactly right. And that, I think, with COVID, it was so hard to maintain those relationships. It was just, so I'm glad people are talking about this now. And I'm very grateful for people speaking about this now because let's all understand that we all have times in our lives when we struggle. Don't hide it. Just, there are people you can talk to your doctor, talk to your friend, get on a support group. So we're talking about it now. It's nothing to be ashamed of. That's for sure. So I'm glad we're doing that. Thank you so much, Ashley, for being my guest.
Thank you.
As I was saying, I'm going to make sure that we have the links for the two books put into with the podcast. And again, all of the contact information for Ashley as well. And really, really appreciate your time. Thank you. This is a great subject to speak on. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.